Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. We're glad you're here with us in class today. We broadcast 2 hours from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains. John is engineering our broadcast in Minnesota at GCN. I'm Vincent Finelli. I'm delighted to be broadcasting with my dear friend, Captain John Regan. Welcome, Captain John Regan.
Good morning, Vincent.
Hey, is it Monday?
It feels like it.
Yeah. Well, John, it's great to be on the air with you. I'm so glad that you're able to be here with us. You've got a number of items that you want to talk about today, and they're very, very serious. Class, let me just tell you one thing that we're going to be talking about, and that is sales taxes. And something very, very dramatic is happening to us right now, and it will impact everyone. Everyone. So let's dig into it. Captain John Regan, you want to talk about financial, demographics, resources, raw materials, energy, food, health, environment, radiation, toxins, space weather, and the social arena, Christophobia, hate speech, technocracy. You want to talk about science and technology, government. You want to talk about war, laws, regulations, and taxation.
We do have a couple of 100 hours today, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the nice things about not being on the air is it's given me some time to reflect on some of the things that not only we've covered, but others on USA Prepares, and this really things that have taken hundreds of hours to go through. I'm going to try to summarize that and get into this horrific Supreme Court decision, which goes so much deeper than just letting states collect sales tax. I guess, to start off at the top there, financial, things really haven't changed. Everything's still bad. Unfortunately, it's kind of like Wile E. Coyote in the Roadrunner cartoons. Now, he'd run past the end of the cliff, and he'd stay there for a little bit until gravity kicked in. Well, we've run off the end of the cliff, and it was extreme increases in debt. We're talking about tens of trillions of dollars over the last few years since the crisis in 2008, in addition to quantitative easing that let us defy all normalcy in finance and economics. Well, a little over a year ago, they announced they were going to end that. So we've now got rising interest rates and what they call quantitative tightening, the reverse of quantitative easing. And both of those together are just going to continue to put more and more pressure until gravity kicks in and the good old coyote is going to plummet down. We can only hope we have as soft a landing and recover as he did. What gets rather frightening is you look at interest rates in history, and it's typically been around 5%. There's been times that it's been higher. You and I remember the 1980s when even low interest rates for things like mortgages were in the double digits. And then since the 2008 crisis, we've had unbelievably low interest rates, and that destroyed people saving for retirement, as well as those that are retired that are depending on income for those people that did manage to save properly. And in the meantime, just looking at the national debt, much less the total U.S. debt, national debt is now over $21 trillion. When you look at just going up to kind of a normalcy, and of course the rates charged for government debt tend to be less than the rest of the economy because it's considered safe. But even that, you're looking at, around the 5%. Again, there's been times it's been considerably higher, but even at 5% on just $20 trillion, to make the math easy, that is $1 trillion a year just in interest. Currently, the government's bringing in about $1.6 trillion a year on income tax. And as that debt has to be resold because they've used short-term bonds for this instead of long-term, we're going to see that interest that we're paying on the national debt go up and up. And that's if things stay relatively normal. We've got the latest Social Security trustee report. Again, things haven't really changed all that much. They're saying that the trust funds, like there's really anything there, it's just government IOUs, will run out by 2034. And when that happens, if nothing else changes, they have to reduce what's currently going out in Social Security payments by over 20%. And of course, people on Social Security now are having a hard time because they've been using fake inflation numbers, so that the cost of living is less than, the adjustment's less than what people in the real world are having to pay. Thus, when you get a reduction, that's going to make the situation even worse, and considering that very, very few people have any real money saved for retirement, and even those that do have into the six figures don't have near enough to live off of. It's going to get nastier and nastier as time goes by. Well, the thing is that this situation, I believe, is going to be worse than what they say for several reasons. One is they're assuming that they're still going to find idiots out there that will continue to buy government debt. If they ever get to the point where they can't do that, then the only option they have left, being the federal government, the state and local governments don't have this option, the federal government can actually start printing money out of thin air. And of course, every time that's done in history, hyperinflation kicks in, and sooner or later you have a nice big nasty crash. Well, the thing is when the government debt becomes unsellable, that not only affects those trust funds, it affects the retirement accounts that people in governments, because those pension funds are having problems too. Some of that's invested in bonds. Of course, the stock market is way overvalued too, but that's another story. And that just makes it where you're not concerned about return on investment, you're concerned about return of investment. We've also got a big shift where we're going to be seeing more and more automation, robotics, and artificial intelligence taking away more and more jobs. So as that happens, that's going to put, I believe, more pressure on the Social Security system because people are going to retire early just to get money. So that's going to deplete things faster. In addition, since there's less people working, there's less money going into the Ponzi scheme. So instead of a 20-some% reduction, I'm expecting that to probably be closer to like 50% reduction. Technically, Social Security can't go broke because they use that Ponzi scheme money that they're getting from the current workers to pay the promised benefits. So is that enough to cheer you up for now?
Yeah. And as you were saying this, I was thinking about Venezuela. And if we want to see what could happen to us, we could just look at what's happening in Venezuela right now. Do you agree with that?
That's it's a little bit different, but yes, we can see some of those same things going on. But we're very quickly getting to the point where just required payments, Social Security, Medicare, and interest on debt are going to be more than the tax revenue in the fairly near future, next decade. So, it's kind of like, get ready. We can use the Great Depression as a guideline, but things are different. People nowadays don't know how to grow their own food. Back then, just about everybody had some kind of relative that lived on a farm, and it was not uncommon. I, figured out that some of the stories my mother was telling me actually was where they went to live with farm relatives during the Depression. And we're not going to have that option. We're going to have to figure out how to raise food in an urban environment where we may not even be able to afford paying rent on our apartments anymore. So the more you can prepare for that, and that includes being out of debt and having skills and a place to raise food, I think that's the most important thing in getting prepared for what's coming. And I'm less concerned about the big events that I was concerned about before, the World War III nuclear war or the EMP route. And we can talk about that when we get back.
Yeah, Captain John Regan's with us. TheFinancialStateOfTheUnion.com. TheFinancialStateOfTheUnion.com. We'll be right back. Captain John Regan's with us. U.S. Air Force Reserves retired. Captain John, please continue.
Well, when I was a young, ignorant second lieutenant fresh out of college, I went on active duty in 1979. That was after Vietnam, but, pretty much during the height of the Cold War. And when I started out, I pretty much thought that if we had that war, World War III, the nuclear war that we all talk about, that things would pretty much be over. Sometime between then and 3 years later, when I went to Germany, I realized that after those bombs happened, most people are still left around. If you're living on an Air Force base, not so much. That's not a good place to be if the nukes go. But if you're not in the area where the blast and the radiation take you out, odds are you're going to survive. And that's basically when I started wanting to prepare for the recovery. I just didn't understand everything else that was going on. And it's kind of funny that now, after these 6 or 7 years with USA Prepares, that I've come around to where, trying to survive the nuclear war, I don't see as a possibility. Yes, you may live, but we end up with a nuclear winter, and this is probably why we didn't have the nuclear conflicts in the past, is with that nuclear winter, you pretty much wipe out most of the ability to raise food. And, of course, without food, you starve, and that's a great way of decreasing population. Well, that's one aspect. And then, Matt Stein comes on and talks about, and how this actually started from a question from a listener, what happens to the nuclear plants when the power grid goes down? And we find out that, without the grid, the nuclear power plants can't do their cooling, and without the cooling, you get a runaway nuclear exchange there where, unlike a bomb where once it does its thing, you just have to deal with that fallout, with a nuclear power plant, once that starts going, that continues on and on, releasing more and more radiation for quite some time. And there's hundreds of these plants around the world. So even if you had a storehouse of food that might last through however long this nuclear winter is going to take, you also have to deal with some horrendous amounts of radiation, and we've already seen what Fukushima has done. Lots of reports from the Pacific where, the wildlife, especially the fish, are getting hard to find. And there's reports up and down the West Coast, Canada and the United States, where, the life that used to be there on the shore just isn't there anymore. We've also got declining insect populations, not just there, but even worldwide. In Germany, in England, all these things are being reported in even mainstream resources. And not all of that's necessarily connected with the radiation. Some of these insect declines have been going on for decades, which kind of correspond with some of these newer insecticides, especially those that are nicotine-based. And that's now believed to be a big part of why the bee population has been going down as well. So that is another part of the picture there. And we'll pick back up after the break.
Captain John Regan, I've got a comment I'd like to share. So I've decided to run for the board of directors of the electric cooperative in our neck of the woods. This will be my third run. And do I expect to be successful? Not really. I don't expect to win because you have to be entrenched. You have to be from here. And, from here means your mama's was born here, and your daddy's was born here, and you're born here, and that's being from here. Well, I'm not from here. I've only been here going on 14 years, but not from here. Well, here's what's happening. So I have this petition that I've been carrying with me and asking people to sign, and all it says is that they are a member of the electric cooperative and they are nominating me to run for the board of directors. Now, the last two times I did this, people would say, well, I don't want to get involved, and I'm not interested in politics, and they just flat out wouldn't sign the petition. So it was difficult. It's not the case this time. This time, everyone whom I've approached has signed the petition. Now, what I'm saying is, John Regan, I think there is a feeling, a sense that things are really not good in pretty much every respect. And because of that, people are now looking for a change, and someone whom they would not have supported before, they're now looking to say, maybe you can help fix this. Maybe you can help stop the non-stop rate increases of our electric utility bills. They're looking for an answer now, and people seem to be delighted to support someone whom they never would have supported before, because heck, they don't want to get involved in politics. So I just wanted to share with you that that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing people are more angry. People have shorter tempers. People are driving their vehicles extremely aggressively, taking chances that make no sense at all. They will cut you off, and when it's dangerous, all to just move up 2 or 3 blocks and then turn off the road that they just cut you off on. Makes no sense. So I think people are really feeling extreme pressure. They're anxious, and they don't have a good feeling about where we're going. And so I just want to tie that all together with what I'm experiencing as I'm traveling through our neck of the woods, asking a few people to sign this petition. Back to you, John.
Last month, Chris Martinson did one of his weekly update videos that explains how we've got to this point. And what he used was where they had done a test with lab rats, and they would put a rat in the cage and they would electrify it, and of course that causes pain, and eventually the rat just becomes used to it and becomes docile, and just nothing you can do about it. Well, then they put a second rat in there, and instead of both the rats just giving up and getting used to it, they fight each other. And that's what's happening here, is the people are feeling more and more pressure, and we're getting hit from several sides. We got the financial side that we've mostly covered, the demographics, which there's various aspects to that. That would take at least an hour or two by itself just to get totally engaged in that. Part of that goes back to the 1960s when Senator Kennedy pushed the new immigration law through, which just totally changed the way the United States looks. And you combine that with the Supreme Court decision, Roe v. Wade, that has led to the premeditated murder. I think we're now approaching 60 million American babies murdered in the womb. And that's the reason why, combined with the financial, that neither party is going to do a thing about immigration, because they need as many suckers to come to the United States to try and make this Ponzi scheme last as long as possible. Whereas the financial they can muck with and have done so. Sooner or later we've got to reckon with that, and it's going to be ugly getting through that part. The demographics, unfortunately, is not something you can change quickly or easily, because it takes time to raise a population, and you just can't, unless they come up with new technology where they clone you as an adult, nothing we can do about that. But that's not all that's happening. The resources. One of the things I discovered, I think it was actually, it was before I spoke at Hear the Watchman Dallas in 2017, that there's a number of natural resources that we just don't have very many years of known resources, and they're not finding replacements for. And it's not just those commodities, it's also energy. We run off of basically petroleum, gas, and coal. And in fact, I just saw an article where the research for discovery of new oil has gone down, and it is literally part of the pipeline. If you don't have the discovery of new fields, then you're going to have a dip just from that. But we still got the problem of the easy oil has, for the most part, been drilled and used. We're now getting into the fracking, where we're getting the harder to reach, but it's taking more and more energy to do that. So back in the early 20th century, when the oil was really coming online, they would use the energy of a barrel to bring out 100 barrels of oil. So that's a great energy return on investment. But that's going down and down, and there's less and less energy being pulled out of the ground for the investment of energy. And while there have been great percentage increases in the quote-unquote renewable sources, which, one requires a lot of the old fuel to create, and not to mention the environmental impacts and the shortage of resources, but let's just forget all of those. It's still a small amount of the picture. And then you also need batteries to store the energy, because, the solar and the wind typically mostly happen during the day, and we need the energy during the night. Plus, you've got the issue of, transport, which is what the, liquid petroleum fuels do so well. cars and planes and trucks and all of that. So it's a big, ugly picture. And then we also have to transition into the food side, which is the energy for, our bodies. I believe it's 2 of the 3, critical nutrients just to make the crops grow and taste reasonably acceptable. Doesn't even include near the nutrition that it used to. In fact, I was reading where, just in our lifetimes, the vitamin A that you used to get from an orange, now you'd have to consume 20 of them to get the same amount of vitamin A a day. And if you even try to do that, all that fructose is going to give you diabetes all on its own. You then have the problem of, what the GMOs are doing to us. They're just, boy, that a bunch of shows, as well as the toxins. And we're finding out more and more about glyphosate, not only how it affects us, but it affects our gut microbiome, which is most of our immune system. And when you combine that with the other ingredients in Roundup, apparently it's even worse. And, just like with the sugar industry, we're finding out that they had studies 50 years ago saying how bad it was. We're getting some of the inside information from Monsanto, where they knew how bad glyphosate was. And it just, can we just get some good news here? But it just keeps on going. So we've already talked about, we've got more radiation in the environment from, not only the nuclear tests that were done, but now with Chernobyl and Fukushima, the toxins, besides the glyphosate, you've got fluoride, you've got mercury, it's like there's no shortage of things there. And then on top of that, we've got the space weather, and I believe I got the link for this on earlier posts. And since I've not been on much this year, you don't have to search through many, but it's on the Suspicious Observers YouTube channel. We have talked about how the Earth's magnetic shield is getting weaker. That allows more cosmic rays and space radiation in. The sun is going through a down cycle, which means more radiation's coming in from outside the solar system at the same time that our shields are going down. And just to make this a trifecta, our solar system is now moving into a galactic void area where we've been in a magnetic cloud. So every day we're moving more and more into this void area, where the cloud was protecting us, this void area won't. So now we're going to see more and more radiation from the galaxy getting into our solar system. It's not a pretty sight. And that's before we even get into all the man-made side of all of this. But let me quickly talk about, I put some links up on the news tab, Financial State of the Union, to get some backup. And I guess we'll talk about that when we get back from the break.
More smiles right after these few short commercial announcements with Captain John Regan. I've got a comment I'd like to make at some point, John, a short one, and it dovetails with exactly what you're saying, what we're seeing right here on the ground. We'll be right back. So, I've been looking at the hay yield here at our farm. John was talking about food and what it's going to be like in the future. Well, here's what I can tell you I'm seeing. So our hay crop is down to 25% of what it used to be in the previous years. So that means that we won't be able to feed all of our herd. We'll probably have to sell off 3/4 of our cows. I was talking to some other farmers, and I said, here's what I'm seeing. And they said, you're right. You're absolutely right. That's what they're seeing, too. So all around our neck of the woods here in Missouri, people who are farmers are saying that the hay crop is down. They're scrambling looking for hay. And hay was being sold at about $30 to $35 for 1,000 pounds. And I was talking with a farmer yesterday, an experienced farmer, And he thinks it's going to go to about $110 for 1,000 pounds. It's going to be that scarce. So what I see is that farmers are, on the same day, farmers are going to say, that's it, I can't feed them anymore. We expected some rain, it hasn't arrived. We're in this very serious drought. Grass isn't growing. And is it solar? It could be solar. Is it rain? Yeah, rain. Could it be chemical contamination? Yeah. Is the grass having a tough time growing? Yeah. And so we're down to 25% of what we used to be able to grow. So the farmers are going to say, all on the same day, can't do it anymore, got to sell the cows. So all these cows are going to go to market. There's going to be a glut of cows. The price is going to plummet. The farmers are going to lose their shirts. And the consumers are going to have a great deal. Beef's going to be cheap for a short time. Then the farmers, if it ever happens that we can recover and start growing more hay, then, the price, the herds will be rebuilt, but the price is going to go up until that happens. I see that. I can really feel it happening, and there's more evidence of that. I'm seeing farm equipment being sold, used farm equipment, being sold for very low prices. I was looking at a hay rake yesterday. Like, gosh, that's a really nice hay rake. Guy wanted $1,500 for it. That's probably a $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 hay rake. Boy, it'd be great to have that hay rake. And it was like great condition. Really nice. Nicer than any equipment we have on our farm. And my thoughts were, well, I bet he's going to have a tough time selling it because, and even though this is hay season, farmers are probably saying, I don't know if I'm going to need a hay rake anymore because it doesn't look like the grass is growing to cut the grass for hay. Just a thought. I wanted to share that with you. I'm very concerned. And now the talk is that farmers are worried about losing their farms. Why? Because they're going to have to dump their cows. And when they dump their cows on the market, that's their livelihood. When they sell their mama cows because they can't afford to feed them, there aren't going to be babies from those mama cows. That's what's happening. John, any thoughts on that?
Wonder why we don't get invited to parties. It's just such cheerful news.
Yeah. Well, it's all true. What we do here, class, is we tell you what we see, and while the other guys and I'm not casting any aspersions. I'm not saying that they don't do a good job. Not doing that at all. I'm just saying while they're talking about politics, we're talking about what's happening on the ground. We can feel it. We can see it. We can hear it. We can taste it. And it doesn't look good. It really doesn't look all that good. Now, some fields, farmers are saying they've had record grass grow. But that's like patches here and there compared to their big fields that they rely on not having much grass at all. And maybe there are types of grasses that can thrive in this environment. And if that's the case, we're going to have to figure out what they are really quickly and make sure we plant those grasses. Because it doesn't look good from my vantage point. Captain John Regan and I will be right back. John, what are we going to talk about on the other side of the top of the hour news?
I'm going to try and wrap it up and then use the last half hour for sales tax.
There you go. We'll be right back. Everyone all set, cocked, and locked? Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Sometime during this hour, we're going to be talking about something that is very, very important. Not that what we haven't been talking about is important, but this is going to be an eye-opener. Back in the 1960s, there was a group of black female singers in white dresses. They were called the Supremes. They were quite a sensation. They're fabulous. You may know them as Diana Ross and the Supremes. Well, in 2018, there is a mostly white male band of men in black dresses. And when people figure out what they've done, it will be quite a sensation. It's coming up this hour. Captain John Regan's with us. Captain John?
Well, I put a few links on my news tab at the Financial State of the Union resources for today. The first one I've called So True, Unfunded Promises. This is a post from John Malden, who does a pretty good job of reporting on what's going on. And he gets the numbers right, and this is a nice resource for if you want to try and point out these things to other people. But I wanted to show how he, even though he got some numbers right, why they're presented wrong. And where this is in the article, if you scroll down, he's got dates on the right side where you link to the archives. This is down around the January 2012 side. For what it's worth, the Social Security says it has a $13.2 trillion unfunded liability over the next 75 years. The next paragraph talks about Medicare's 75-year unfunded liability of $37 trillion. He says that's the benefits they expect to pay minus the revenue they expect to receive. Yeah, but this is not what they're going to pay out. This is what we would have to invest today, earning interest in order to pay out the future promises. So the true problem is much, much bigger. Another couple paragraphs down, he talks about Larry Kotlikoff, which we've covered too, says that it's closer to $210 trillion. Again, that's what we need today, earning interest. And I found an article where he said that in his latest calculation, the interest rate he used is 3.9%. So let me explain to you why Trump can't fix this. And let me just say, let's call the problem $200 trillion, which is just Social Security, Medicare, not any of the other unfunded liabilities out there. And let's round the interest rate to 4%. And I think it's going to be going higher than that. But $200 trillion at 4%, if you don't have that $200 trillion this year, which, considering that that's more than twice all the money in the world, it's kind of hard to come up with. You would have, in essence, $8 trillion in interest on that. So if you don't have that $200 trillion this year, you'd need to put aside $8 trillion and start making interest on that just to keep from getting worse on the unfunded liabilities. Well, we talk about trillions all the time. How does that really figure into things? Well, if you look at the IRS tax stats, and unfortunately they are rather behind on getting information out, the personal tax return stats, the most recent are 2015, business is from 2013. So you have to kind of guess where it might be now. And if you look at those, you also have to keep in mind the business ones, it is all business, but you need to concentrate on the C corporation part of that, because the partnerships, the S corps, sole proprietors, all that business income is reported on the personal return, so it's included in the personal return side. You don't want to have to double count income and have things wrong. And the other thing you might notice when you look at the business returns, you see that they have over $30 trillion, this is 2013, in revenue. That's not profit, that's sales, but you have to keep in mind that you have the people that have the raw materials, you have the manufacturers who buy the raw materials, you have the distributors that buy what the manufacturers have, then you have the retail outlets that buy what the distributors have purchased. So that multiplies the amounts reported. The net result of that 30-some trillion is about $3 trillion in profit. And then some of that gets distributed as dividends. But just to give you a rough idea, it's actually a little less than 10%, but roughly 10% for the corporate side of things. When you look at the personal returns, total reported income, and this includes everything from business, investments, Social Security, and what we think of income, salaries, wages, and commissions. All totals around $10 trillion for 2015. About $7 trillion of that is the salaries, wages, commissions. So if you took that $7 trillion and you mandated that be doubled, which obviously business can't do without raising prices because they're only making $3 trillion as is. They can't just afford to pay out another $7 trillion without doing something. But then you have to follow this all the way through. If you immediately doubled wages, salaries, and commissions, and the federal government taxed 100% of that increase so that the government gets that $7 trillion, and instead of spending it, they actually invest it, making 4% interest, that is still not enough money to keep Social Security and Medicare unfunded liabilities from getting worse. So, no, there's no way that Trump can fix this problem. It's going to get ugly. The only question is when. The next one I have there is so useful for depopulation. We had talked before about how ibuprofen damages boys and affects their fertility and their ability to produce testosterone. Well, now we found out that girls exposed to ibuprofen in the womb are found to have half the number of eggs in their ovaries. So that wonderful over-the-counter drug for pain is doing wonders for depopulation, which, again, affects demographics. And in resources, a new one that just came out that kind of surprised me, maybe you want to use this as an investment opportunity. The world is running out of sand. Now, you might not have thought about that, but sand's used in construction, and we're going through a lot of it. There's only so much of it. We don't have another way of making it. So an article for your perusal there as well. And I just might want to point out, if you use the Treasury website for debt to the penny, because typically the media only talks about the budget deficit. With this, you can see what debt has done. It's crossed over $21 trillion. The most recent report is from the 3rd. They're running a day or two behind because of the holiday, where the federal debt is now $21.2 trillion. When the year started, it was artificially kept down, but at the end of 2017, it was $20.5 trillion. So in half a year, we've gone up $700 billion in debt. And again, all that new debt is coming at higher interest rates. The older debt's being turned over. So again, that's going to keep that interest rate expense going up. I also want to talk about, if you scroll down, I've got a video section that I didn't get a chance to talk about a couple of shows ago. If you're a new listener, you might not know, I've found out I suffer from too much iron, too much insulin. My wife does too. If each of these videos, I'll list 4 of them, 2 for iron, 2 for fructose. If you are really limited on time, at least watch the first one of each of these, the why you must test ferritin levels and sugar the bitter truth. Ideally, watch all 4 because it really gives you more of the picture. About a third of you have too much iron and don't know it. And if you just test iron, that doesn't show it because my iron levels were normal. My ferritin levels were in hemochromatosis range, was over 300 for a male, over 200 for a female. Fructose, the insulin resistance problem, that affects 80% of you. So even if you're one of the fortunate ones that neither one of these affects you, you're going to know somebody that it does affect. And the only way to know is to get tested, and you may have a problem getting your doctor to do this, or you may or may not have insurance, and that's a whole other line. If insurance will cover testing and you get your doctor to do it, fine. Otherwise, in most states, 45 of them, you can go online and get this done yourself. The best site I found for that is Walk-In Lab. I've got a link for that at the bottom, along with a disclaimer. If you use that link, I get a small commission, and if you use that, I really appreciate it because, it helps for all the work I do and the tests I need. But the test you have to do, the serum ferritin, that's the only one way you're going to tell if you've got too much iron. The optimum level should be 30 to 60, and you start having damage once it reaches greater than 100. The problem is trying to find a doctor that will write a prescription to take blood if you are not eligible to donate blood. We'll talk about the other tests when we come back.
Yeah, about 6 seconds. We're going into commercial break. We'll be right back. Yeah, Captain John Regan's with us. Please continue.
I don't know about you, but I like to save money. And Walk-In Lab had a 4th of July sale, saved 15% site-wide. And that sale was supposed to go off at midnight Pacific time. And they set their timer for noon today, so through 2 o'clock Central Time, you can still get that 15% off, and there's a banner on their page, so you don't have to remember this. It says use code FIREWORK when you check out. And the prices are good to begin with. Most of these tests that I've listed are under $30. The the vitamin D, last I checked, was $58. And with the exception of the fasting insulin, the other three do not require fasting, but it's easier just go in. If you want to get all of these done at one time, just go in fasting. Talked about the serum ferritin. We did 2 hours on January 2nd talking about iron and insulin, so I don't want to get in that. You can find that in the archives. A1C test that gives an idea of your average glucose levels, blood sugar, over the last 2 to 3 months. You want that to be below 5.7. 5.7 is where you get in the prediabetes range, and that's indicating that your glucose mechanism, your metabolism, is out of whack. However, before that even kicks in, your insulin starts not working properly. You start developing insulin resistance, which sets off a whole bunch of other things. And in fact, that's one of the things I'm getting retested. Last time I had it tested, it was 47. The reference range only goes up to 23.9, so it's way, way out of whack. And if you're on the page, you see 2 to 3 is optimum. Less than 5 is even considered healthy. So I'm way, way above that. And that insulin resistance does so many bad things to the body, don't have time for that. And then the 4th test I have listed is the vitamin D25 hydroxy. If you're not taking vitamin D, this is a way to see what your levels are. You probably need to supplement. And Dr. Shealy has all the nice recommendations on that. And if you supplement, you need to take K2 so the calcium doesn't end up in the wrong place. And if you are supplementing, you need to take this test once or twice a year anyway, just to make sure that your levels aren't too high. Lots of other tests out there. These are some of the more important. If you don't know what your insulin, glucose, ferritin are, you don't know if you have a problem. Like I say, 80% of you are going to have an insulin problem, and about 30% is going to have an iron problem. Okay. We'd like to fix these things. Unfortunately, government kind of gets in the way, and we like to blame the politicians, but it's actually the people that elect them, and so much has happened in the United States. And I found out back in February that this has gone on for some time. I subscribe to Bill Federer's newsletter. He's got a website, The American Minute, and you can actually look up in his archives February 17th for this. I don't know if I'd heard about Billy Sunday. He was a baseball player that became an evangelist. And in fact, just a short time after this was posted, that's when Billy Graham died. And there was another post talking about, the string of evangelists that led to Billy Graham becoming who he was. And Billy Sunday is one of those. And in 1914, Billy Sunday made the comment that our churches have become or degenerated into third-rate amusement joints. If he were alive today, I think he'd have to say our churches have become first-rate amusement joints. And that's where I believe a lot of the problem is, to get our, Christians in America to get off their butts, read their Bible, and get active.
Okay, we'll be right back. Captain John Regan, thefinancialstateoftheunion.com. Captain John Regan's with us. I'm looking forward to what you have to say about the guys and gal in black dresses. Is that what we're going to talk about now?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
If you do any kind of following of mainstream news, a week or two ago, the Supreme Court changed the way, changed the former decision saying that, states do have the right to collect sales tax through out-of-state vendors. And if you didn't know that, surprise, surprise, I've got 3 links in this area to help understand, the part of this big mess. Before we dive into that, one of these actually included a quote from Mark Twain, and I want to turn that around to a question. Do you know the difference between a tax man and a taxidermist? Well, the taxidermist leaves the skin. It's, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yeah.
Mark Twain did have a way of, concisely stating issues of the day. And today we've got state and local governments with horrific unfunded liabilities for pensions. They really have a problem trying to tax people more because people are already tapped out. So that's why you see more aggressive fines, hundreds of dollars for minor infractions. And this is part of that picture. It's not why it's, a really bad decision. We'll get into that. But I want to cover basically what these articles talk about first. The first one does a pretty good job of giving you an overview if you haven't heard about it. If you think back in the old days before the Internet, there was mail order. People placed advertisements and people would order through the mail. And, of course, later on that became phone ordering. They deliver, and because they were out of state, they wouldn't be required to collect any sales taxes. Well, I'm going to talk more about Texas because that's what I know best, but it's usually pretty similar in other states. The full terminology is sales and use tax. So when you go to a retailer in your state, they're going to charge you sales tax according to the way it works there. Here in Texas, there's some nice things. First off, it doesn't cost you money to get the sales tax permit, nor do you have to put up a bond to do business. In Missouri there, you have to put up, I believe it's a $50 bond, which stays with the state until you close that business. Then there's the matter of what rate do you charge where. And if you have a physical location, that's geared to where you are. And it's crazy because some of these taxing entities don't correspond with zip codes. I'll give you an example. Here in the Metroplex, there's Balch Springs, which does not belong to the Metro Transit Authority. You can't take a bus to Balch Springs because there's no agreement there, and thus they're not subject to the MTA sales tax. And if you have a non-physical location, you're doing business within Texas, you're going to charge the rate of where your office is and submit your report to the state that way. In Texas, if you go to the grocery store, food items are not taxed unless they're junk food. So if you buy, your soft drinks there, you're going to pay tax for them just as you would for prepared food. In Missouri, you go to the grocery store, you're going to pay sales tax. So not only do you have to deal with the rates, you have to deal with the item, and it can be different between different items. Then there's sometimes they have sales tax holidays, like here in Texas, before school. They have sales tax holidays for school supplies and clothing items, but even that gets, leave it to politicians to make things really rough. You buy a belt, no sales tax. You buy a belt buckle, you're going to pay sales tax for that. Don't try to make sense. It's the government. There's no logic. So this is complicated just by the very nature of all the different entities. Now, if you're doing business in the state and you've got that location, you learn what you have to do there, and that's fine. If you decide to go onto the internet, up until now, if it's out of state, you don't worry about it. However, let's talk about the use tax. If you order from the internet and you don't pay sales tax, you're still supposed to file annually with the state and pay the tax that you would have paid had you gone through a local merchant and paid the sales tax. Very few people, I don't know anybody, does their use tax filing paying the tax that they're supposed to pay. And rather than getting those people, which, you're talking about millions and millions of people in the United States not paying sales tax from those purchases, that's a lot of effort for governments to do, not to mention you're going to tick off voters. And rather than do that, now they're going to be able to change the law and force a business in another state to collect sales tax. And it's not even a real issue because the big internet companies are already collecting sales tax. Most of them are in the states that have sales tax. So this is mostly going to affect small business. And of course, small business doesn't have the time, money, resources to comply with the current complex laws. Hopefully, if they're going to continue down this road to extort the money, they'll make it to where there's a simplified law for people that are collecting the funds from out of state. But beyond that, it's taxation without representation because small businesses are now having to dedicate resources at no charge to these states with no representation, which really amounts to a taxation without representation. And if that were it, it'd be bad enough. And I also want to share one thing. Amazon is more than just Amazon. There's thousands of other sellers that go through Amazon as their portal to the world. And if you do the fulfilled by Amazon, Amazon will tell you where to ship your product to their warehouse, which they have several out there. And depending on the laws of the state where you have to ship it to, that may already obligate you to collect and pay sales tax for orders in that state. Now, you had no choice but to use that warehouse because Amazon told you to. And in fact, Amazon may transfer that to a different warehouse, and you may or may not even know where that is. So just keeping track of where your inventory is, even though you don't have a physical presence for your company, it can still make you liable for tax just under current laws. It's absolutely crazy. But this gets worse. And to shift focus a little bit, if you remember back during the Obama administration, Congress passed some really bad laws. One of them was to force foreign banks to follow American laws and make them snitch on American citizens that used their banks, had accounts with their banks, and as a result of that, a lot of banks don't do business with American citizens anymore. But the United States has no jurisdiction outside the borders. It was totally, contrary to, established law, the way things are done, and simply because the United States is a big bully, they've managed to force most of the rest of the world to comply with an illegal law. So let's now look at what this decision has done, especially in light of what is an established methodology for the United States. Now, not only can these other states force you to comply with their tax laws, since now you're considered to be in their state for practical purposes, doing business, you can be subject to any other kind of law that a state passes. And if you've been following what's been going on in California, they're getting really nasty on laws regarding what used to be normal behavior. And we'll talk about that when we get back.
Captain John Regan's with us. And in a couple minutes, we'll be back. Class, very quickly, there is something that you can do. Here's something that I do. In Lebanon, Missouri, there's a Walmart. Sales tax in Lebanon, Missouri is 7.413%. Sales tax in the little hamlet that I live in 20 miles away, is 6.1%. And I found out that, the difference is 1.313%. And what I found out was if I go to Walmart, if I want to buy something, if I go to the store, I'm going to pay 7.413% sales tax. If I order it online and they offer free shipping, I use my home address where the sales tax is 6.1%. And I save the difference in the sales tax. And it's shipped free. So that's one tactic you can use. It's not big, but it does help a little bit. Captain John?
And just to try and wrap up on this, and this ties into the Christophobia that's so rampant in the world today. For those that love sin, the teachings of Jesus are hate speech. And we already have laws that have made certain lifestyle sins protected, and it's getting worse and worse. Now, we've only talked about, varying laws within the states, but because of what the United States did, imposing its laws on other countries, was to stop those other countries from imposing their laws on Americans. And I'm not talking about the commerce, I'm talking about how you live your life. You have social media posts out there. What if your social media post now gets classified as hate speech? And these laws, especially in other countries, can impose severe penalties, including fines and prison time. This is really, really a step into a total nightmare. And I don't know if we can even reel this back in now. It's a very, very bad Supreme Court decision. The laws that the United States have passed is very bad, and I don't see the public even aware enough to try and put pressure on the supposed representatives to try and fix this. I don't know exactly where this will go, how long it will take us to get there, but we should at least be having discussions on what to do about protecting our God-given rights. Vincent?
Yeah, no question. I absolutely agree with that. John, you and I have been at events together, and when I announce that you're going to be speaking, I'll say, you're going to wipe that smile right off your face. and
but I'll have you laughing, too.
Yes, absolutely. But what you're saying, John, is an eye-opener. You say it straight. You tell it like it is. And it's shocking to so many people. And the Supreme Court decision is just unbelievable. Who do they think they are? And how much effort is it going to take to undo this? And you're talking about sales tax and other taxes. And Hillary Clinton said, if it moves, she was talking to a foreign dignitary, if it moves in the United States, we tax it. If it doesn't move, we regulate it. And we're at the point now where they're scrambling, looking for, sure it doesn't move? So they can tax it. It's unbelievable what is happening to us. So, for example, if I buy engine oil for a tractor, I can buy it as for farm use tax exempt. It makes sense, right? We don't pay tax on tractors. We don't pay tax on implements. But if I buy engine oil that could be used in a gasoline engine, I have to pay sales tax on it to use it on the farm, because they say, well, yeah, but you could use this in your car. Yeah, but I'm going to use it in my farm equipment. Well, no, you got to pay tax. That's the way it is in Missouri. And we've got to throw out everyone start over. I can't think of anybody who, other than, Donald Trump, he's doing a great job. Other than him, I'm not looking at it to re-elect anyone. I'm not. Captain John, thanks so much for being with us and sharing your time and your expertise and your knowledge.